Okay, welcome everyone to this webinar where we share the final results of the Users Power the Web Accessibility Directive Erasmus project. We are sending live from beautiful Cyprus. Unfortunately, we are indoors, otherwise we would also enjoy the sunshine. But thank you for being here with us this afternoon. We do unfortunately have problems with our captioning, and we will. This is not working, so I will do. How can I? No, I can't. I can't make this change. So technology, we do not have possibilities to move the PowerPoint presentation. Oh, now it's actually happening. So another one. Yeah, the one before. Can we go back? So. We do not provide closed captions, unfortunately, but we do have a live stream text. So I just shared the link to the live stream in the chat. So for everyone needing live captions, we have manual professional captions, but unfortunately not in the closed captioning. So we do provide sign language interpretation. So you can choose the interpretation button that looks like a globe to see the sign language interpretation. And with the new setup in Zoom, you can move around and really make the sign language large or big and move it wherever you want it to be on the screen. So this is one of the things that have been much better in the last couple of months when it comes to accessibility. This event is recorded, so it will be shared by everyone who has registered from across Europe and beyond after the event, and it will also be published on YouTube and linked from the project website. You are welcome to ask questions whenever you like. You can use the Q&A function for that, and we also have the chat open for technical questions, but please use the Q&A function if you would like to ask questions to the speakers. And we have all our partners present here today to help us through these 2 hours where we present the project. And I want to ensure you that we are doing our best to explain the whole project to you. And we are also going to present who we are. And I should maybe have started with that, but my name is Susanna Lorin, and I'm the Chief Research and Innovation Officer at Funka. We're one of the partners in this project. And now I will give the floor to the actual project lead, the coordinator, Susanne Dierks from the University of Dortmund, Technical University of Dortmund. And she will make a presentation of herself and also the overall project and why we are doing this to empower users when it comes to web accessibility. Susanne, please.
So I'm trying. Yes, it's working now. So yeah, hello, and a very warm welcome from me as well. I'm Susanne Dierks from the Technical University of Dortmund, and I'm part of the project coordination team at TU Dortmund University, and I will introduce you to the background of the project and give you some more information about the partners we are set up for doing what we want to do to empower users for the Web Accessibility Directive. So the project name, the abbreviation, the acronym is interesting, but it stands for Involving, Empowering and Training End Users with Disabilities to fully participate in the Web Accessibility Directive objectives. And this project is funded by the European Union under the Erasmus Plus program. And it's an action type of cooperation partnership in vocational education and training. And the Web Accessibility Directive, which is commonly known as a WAD, is a directive which was issued by the European Parliament and the Council of the European Union in 2016. And it deals with the accessibility of the websites and mobile applications of public sector bodies. The Web Accessibility Directive is resting on 3 pillars. It has the feedback mechanism as a main pillar we are dealing in this project with. It has the accessibility statement and the monitoring and supervising bodies. How does the WAD works? The main partners involved in the Web Accessibility Directive are the users. They are building the basement of the Web Accessibility Directive because they need to have accessible digital contents and accessible mobile applications, and the authorities and municipalities are required to provide accessible content on their websites and their mobile applications. And the monitoring and enforcement bodies are here to supervise and to advise the authorities and municipalities for making their content better accessible. And how these three partners work together in the accessibility process is that the authorities and municipalities, the public sector bodies, are required to put an accessibility statement on their websites and providing a feedback mechanism. And the users, which hopefully do not encounter so many accessibility problems on the websites and mobile applications, can give feedback if they encounter problems. And the public sector bodies are required to react on this feedback, and the monitoring and supervision bodies are somehow supervising the whole process of accessibility, digital accessibility, and they advise the public sector bodies in doing better and providing more accessible content. And one of the problems we found out doing our research before we asked for funding of the project was that the feedback mechanism is hardly ever used by the users, and despite of the still many problems people are encountering on websites and when using mobile applications, the feedback is still very rare. So the main objectives of our projects are to empower users to report accessibility issues, because to date there is an insufficient implementation and usage of the feedback mechanism and the accessibility statement. So sometimes even the accessibility statement is missing on websites of public sector bodies. So it's really important to, on the one hand side, empower users to report accessibility issues they are encountering, because most of the times the users think it's their personal problem and they are obliged to find a workaround or to help themselves, but it's not the case. So the users have the right to complain about accessibility issues, and they should use the feedback mechanisms provided by the website owners. And the minor objective of our project is to support public sector bodies to improve the implementation of the Web Accessibility Directive. So what did we do to achieve our objectives? We used a lot of different scientific methods. We did interviews with end users and public service bodies across Europe. We conducted online surveys with public sector bodies from over 20 European countries. We did intensive desktop research on digital accessibility, and we carried out various kinds of workshops with different stakeholders, so with public sector bodies, with political institutions, with organizations of people with disabilities, and learned a lot from this to prepare our material. The project consists of 4 different project phases where we developed the 4 different results I'm presenting here. So in the first part of the project, we developed a toolkit to capture and categorize feedback from end users about web accessibility and web accessibility problems. And this is somehow representing the end user perspective in the project and in the material we developed. In the second phase of the project, we developed an interactive repository of best practices on structuring and reporting web accessibility issues. In the third project phase, we developed a model curriculum for training people with disabilities to provide relevant and actionable feedback on web accessibility. And at the moment, we are working on the 4th project results, the practical guidelines on how to use the model curriculum to empower and train people with disabilities to provide feedback on accessibility issues, and the guidelines and the curriculums are meant to be used by VET providers and organizations of people with disabilities for preparing and doing actual training courses for people with disabilities. So, and to achieve all these various important tasks, we put a project team together with a lot of different and very important experiences. The project partners are the European Blind Union, which represents the end users and is aiming for end user participation in the project. The second project partner is Funka Nu. It's a Swedish company, and they are experts in digital accessibility. The third project partner is Synthesis, with experience and expertise in education and social innovation. And we from TU Dortmund University bring in experience from science and education. And we have as well some associated partners, which is the European Disability Forum, the University of Nicosia, and the German BAG Selbsthilfe. And they help us to spread the material and to validate the material we put together in the project. So that's everything I prepared for the background and the project partners, and I'm happy to hand over to Susanna again.
So, thank you very much, Susanna, for this overview of the project. And we got one question about the end users, how, except for the European Blind Union, of course, being one of the partners, and the European Disability Forum, an associated partner, how did you, or how did we interact with end users? You said something about kind of across Europe, but how many have actually been involved in collecting all this information from the end user perspective? Could you say something about that?
Yes, yes. So it's very important to get the end user perspective on digital accessibility. So we did some long personal interviews with end users from different countries in Europe. We interviewed altogether 37 persons with disabilities from Europe, from France, and from Sweden and Cyprus. And we did some more interviews when preparing the interactive repository with public service bodies from over 20 countries in Europe, like Malta, Norway, and Czechoslovakia.
Okay, so that was a very broad perspective, and also we worked on making sure that we had also not only from different corners of Europe, but of course also that all the different disability groups or end user needs groups. So one question that hasn't come here, but that I know that we often get is, why are you focusing on this instead of kind of training the public sector bodies? Because that's where the problem is. And we, of course, agree on that. But we also think that this part is important. And I think you kind of covered it when you talked about the pillars. But could you say something more about why we are focusing on the end users in this project?
Yeah, so in the research we did before, we asked for funding of the project, and during our interviews we often got the response from our interview partners that they somehow feel responsible for not being able to use websites and mobile applications of public sector bodies, and we felt that it's not the case for the users to feel bad about not being able to interact with the feedback mechanism and with different parts of the website. So we thought it's a good idea to train and to empower the users to really execute their rights on accessibility and on participation in all areas of life, digital or analog.
Okay, thank you very much for this. And we don't have any more questions in the Q&A now, but please continue to ask questions. We will have short Q&A interactions after each of the presentations. And now I would like to ask my colleague Peter Kemeny to present on the toolkit, because that is the next part. And now the PowerPoint presentation magically works, so that's really good. Peter?
Hello, I'm Peter Kemeny from Funka, and I will talk to you about the first two project results, the methodological toolkit, or to call it shortly, toolkit. And then afterwards, I'll talk a bit about the best practice repository. So these two project results kind of create the basis for the curriculum we created afterwards and the guidance, and they try to capture the different aspects of giving feedback. So the user aspect, end user aspect, and the website mobile application owners aspect. So in this project, we aim to involve many stakeholders. We interviewed users about their experiences when using feedback mechanism, or actually when not using because maybe they didn't find it, or maybe they don't know about it. We were aiming for a very broad set of answers to know why there aren't so many feedback, why there's not so much feedback sent to public sector bodies. This is a bit of a black hole. We cannot know exactly how many feedback are sent because there's no reporting on that, but various research showed, as it was mentioned, that the feedback mechanism is underused, and we still think it's a great tool, hence this project. So we interviewed users to learn about their knowledge and their preferences and actually their motivations when giving feedback. And also we surveyed and talked to public sector bodies to learn about their existing practices and also their experience of receiving feedback. And in this project, we tried to connect the dots. So then we summarize or synthesize these two aspects and create a curriculum or a training basis for a training that is considering what is really out there and what is really missing. So the first of these is the toolkit. The toolkit is aimed for, first of all, end users and end user organizations. The toolkit provides an overview of the feedback mechanisms, of a bit how to provide feedbacks, how feedback mechanisms look like, and it kind of provides a classifications of the expertise, but also the feedback mechanism. So it tries to be an overview document, and we think that's, first of all, very useful for the end users and to raise awareness of the feedback mechanism, of the existence and where to find it. But it's also useful for website owners, and as this project aims for creating a training or a curriculum, it's also useful for the training providers. And the content, as we'll see, links to the curriculum. The different parts of the toolkit, which I'll shortly go through, are linked to the curriculum. The toolkit can be used for the training or for preparations of the training. And the content can be kind of grouped in two bigger groups. First is about feedback, why there's not enough feedback, or what are the challenges to provide feedback. And we found that there are two types of challenges. One is the technical challenge when the feedback mechanism is not there, obviously, or when it's not accessible, or it's very difficult to find. And there's a motivational challenge as well, as we learned that some users used to give feedback, but they didn't get an answer, so they kind of gave up, or some users rightfully say that it's not really their task to fix what is a legal obligation of public sector bodies. But our aim is to make feedback easier through this project, and kind of motivate the users that it makes sense and it's a great contribution for the accessibility. Still, we maintain that it is the obligation of the public sector bodies of the website and mobile application owners to make and keep their websites and apps accessible. Then the toolkit related to this also contains tips to website owners, kind of how to, for example, create the accessibility statement so that it motivates end users to give feedback, to show them that they are listened to, and also some tips to end users. For example, how to find the feedback mechanism if they can't find the link directly on the website, how to search for it, or which alternative channels to use. And in general, how to make it easier to give feedback within the framework that is on a website. The other part of the toolkit content, the other group is providing feedback. So first of all, there's kind of an overview of users and their expertise. The baseline is that users are different, user needs are different, and as a result, they also have different expertise. So users with different disabilities can find different barriers, and it's important to address and reach a very wide group or variety of users. So feedback is more complete. The other part is how to give actionable feedback. When we say actionable feedback, we refer to a feedback that can be used by the website owners. So it's kind of what to write about, where to write it, and how to describe a problem. In the toolkit, it's an overview, and it's more detailed, obviously, in the curriculum. And finally, there's like a characterization or a classification of feedback mechanisms, the different channels, the different types like phone, email, or forms. And there are some basic suggestions how to make them better. But then there's another project result for that, and that's the repository. So just to have an example of what we are talking about, here are two feedback mechanisms. One is a simple feedback page that shows a phone number and an email address, and also a postal address. So it's a positive thing. It provides very different channels for users, and the user can choose which is better for them. And this one is a bit more complex. It's a form that the advantage of this is that it guides the users in the sense that it asks questions and says what's important to share about the problem, the accessibility barrier they found. So again, the toolkit is kind of a baseline document, an overview, and we think it's very useful for raising awareness about the feedback mechanism and just kind of basic troubleshooting. The next one is the repository, or the best practice repository. Here, so this is obviously basically for mainly for website owners. It's a list of best practices that website owners can look at and use in a combination, usually to make their feedback mechanism better and get more feedback. But it's also useful for users, training providers, or user organizations, again, to learn about the feedback mechanisms, to see what they can expect or what features that might exist, so they can look for those. Here again, just a short overview of the content of the repository along two aspects. First of all, there are around 30 best practices in the repository, and they are presented there's always a short description about what the best practice is, an explanation of why is it, how does it work, and why is it good, maybe sometimes which user group it is beneficial for. And we try to offer some real-life examples. So there are some screenshots with real examples, with disclaimer that along the life of this repository, these web pages might change. We hope that they improve, but it can happen sometimes that they change for the worse as well. So we provide links to these examples, but at some point they might not be there anymore. But they are a very good, providing very good examples and visual examples of how different best practices look like. The other aspect is about the content is the structure basically of the repository. So it goes through the feedback process from the starting point, from the access points. It provides best practices about the entry points to provide feedback. So it can be a direct link. It can be through the accessibility statement. Here, the important thing is that the access points are easy to find, visible, and well, there's an accessible route to them. There are some recommendations or good practices for the accessibility statement, that it should be inclusive. The accessibility statement is kind of the invitation to provide feedback. So if it has an inviting style, just to mention one good example or good practice, then it's more probable that users feel confident that their feedback will reach its goal, and it's more probable that they will provide feedback. Then there are some general aspects and guidance, for example, that there should be always more than one feedback channel, or there are different ways to provide help or guidance for providing feedback or filling in a form. And then the repository has best practices linked to different formats, so phone, telephone feedback, email feedback, or feedback through a form. And to make the journey complete, it also has some recommendations about responding to feedback. It's beyond the strictly defined feedback mechanism, but it's a very important part to address because users should know that feedback is received. It's very good if they get information about how their feedback is handled and when they can expect the accessibility barriers to be fixed. And here as well, I would like to show some good practices. First, on the first slide, there's a screenshot with a feedback page that has a website that has a direct link to the feedback mechanism. So usually, or the legal requirement is to have the feedback link in the accessibility statement, but some website owners went beyond and they put a link directly to the footer of their web page. So it's on every site. It's very easy to give feedback. It invites feedback. And sometimes it is even set up in a way that by pressing the button, some technical details are already filled in, like which browser is used. Disclaimer here as well, it should be also done with the knowledge or the agreement of the user. Another best practice is what I mentioned before, to provide different channels. This is quite a complete example. It provides an email channel for somebody who would like to just write their feedback freely, phone number, and also a possibility to provide feedback in a pre-structured way through a form. In the end, it's about user preferences. The more ways and channels we provide, the more users can provide feedback. And the last one is a very specific example, is the possibility to send attachments. We didn't find many of these, but it's a very useful thing. It opens up the feedback possibilities. The user can attach a video. If they are sign language users, actually they can sign in that video, or they can send a screenshot. So it is extremely useful. And it's one of the 30 recommendations. I think, yes, that's the short presentation of the two project results. If there's any questions.
Yes, thank you very much, Peter. That was a lot of information in a short time, but we did get a lot of questions. So I first wanted just to circle back on what you said with the sending attachment. I think that is very important, especially for screenshots, but we didn't really find any examples of what we would like to see, which is actually the possibility to have a live video chat where you could actually sign to somebody. That we have written about, but we haven't really seen it, because sending a video where you sign is kind of it's like a backwards engineering of reverse engineering of that problem. But it's good to it's kind of one step forward at least, and the possibility to attach something I think is kind of opening more doors at least to the users. So I have provided direct links to the toolkit and the repository in the chat, and they are both under the same in the project website. It's the same concept of the links. So it's funka.com/en/upower-toolkit, and the repository is funka.com/en/upower-repository. So very logical when you learn it the first time. So now to the questions, Peter. The first one is, did you come across technical challenges on the side of the users, or was that not relevant?
Okay, so if we came across technical challenges on the side of the users, well, I tried to interpret the question. I think the question is if in our service or interaction with the users, we found an example when it was maybe the lack of technical knowledge of the user or a problem on the user side that prevented providing feedback. So or accessibility. Yeah. So okay. So there are two sides of it. Yes, we definitely found accessibility problems in feedback mechanisms, and that was a frequent critique from the users. But on the other side, if the question referred to if the user had technical problems with their setup, so that's kind of a roundabout thing. It leads back to accessibility. So if the feedback mechanism is accessible, then actually it should be accessible for kind of any user setup. Should be able to handle any assistive technology. So on that part, it still goes back that if the feedback mechanism is good, technically well set up, then it shouldn't create a problem. And the other part, if it's about the technical lack of technical knowledge of the user, it's a very important message we aim to send in both the toolkit and the repository, and definitely in the curriculum, that so we have the problem of there's not enough feedback. We should not limit the possibility of giving feedback by wanting the user to exactly know the web accessibility terms, or exactly know if the problem they met is actually legally an accessibility, a non-compliance issue, or it's a broader accessibility issue. We encourage in our project results and in our communication the users to provide any feedback to the website owner about their difficulties of using website or actually using the feedback mechanisms. Many of them are directly accessibility issues. Then some other might be more usability issue, but in the end, it leads to the same result. The idea is, most of all with public sector websites, that users should be able to use them as easy as possible. So the interaction between the public sector and the citizens is smooth. And can I go back just to the comment, Susanna, your comment about not having the live chat possibility, that we haven't found any chat possibility in real life. So that's a perfect example that shows why it's good to have both the toolkit and the repository. The toolkit covers different feedback channels, and it mentions or lists the video chat possibility, which is extremely useful for many users, and definitely useful for the users that use sign language. So it's mentioned there, but it is not in the repository because we couldn't find any good examples or any examples of that. But we hope that by listing it in the toolkit, we open the minds and open possibilities to integrate it in the future.
Yes, very good. So thank you for circling back on that. It kind of also describes the deliverables in a good way. So thank you for that. And I think also what we have found, not only when we kind of encountered or discussed with end users, but really that's a broader perspective of many people thinking that I don't know enough and I'm not technical enough to provide feedback. And that's really what we want to say, that every feedback is useful, not only from the legislators, but really from the public sector bodies, because they say we need to understand what the problems are, even if it's the responsibility of the public sector body website owner to understand accessibility and provide accessibility. But I don't think it's because they are evil that they are not doing this. What we find in the research is that often they actually don't know. They think they have done enough, or they think they are compliant, but it's only when the end users point to this or that actually doesn't work in real life. They need that in real life information. And many of the public sector bodies we have worked with, not only in this project, but also in other projects, say that when we do get feedback, that's fantastic, because that is not just some boring legal requirement. Somebody tells us we have to do this, but this is a real user saying, I cannot access your information. And then we need to solve it. And everyone wants to solve it because they would like their information to be reachable by all people. So we can't overstate the need for everyone to just give any feedback. Just say, I can't do this. I have no clue why, but it's fine. That feedback is maybe more difficult for the website owner to take action on, but it is still a very important message. So whenever you have the time or feel empowered, then please do provide feedback, because every little message is important. So we have another interesting question here. Have you noticed in the interviews that the word accessibility, in quotes, can be understood like being something else and receiving feedback from something related to access versus accessibility?
Yes, but that's okay. So, and that's one part of the message here, and also what we incorporated in the curriculum, the model curriculum, that it is about, so accessibility is about access. If there's any barrier because of which a user cannot get to the information or cannot execute the interaction they need, then it's an access issue. If it's about technical accessibility, then very probably it is part of the legislation. If it's about an accessibility issue, like the user cannot find something, or cannot find, to stick to the example or this topic, cannot find the feedback mechanism, that would be in the end an accessibility issue, or an access issue. So we encourage the users to provide any feedback, don't try to limit themselves and try to find out if, well, this is legally required, because I don't know if you said it today already, feedback is a gift, and it's good to receive. So what we learned from our research is that public sector bodies are happy to receive feedback, because they might not know how they can improve, and they want to improve their websites. But it's also good to give feedback. It's an opportunity for the users as well to be a part of it, to help the public sector bodies, and in the end to create better websites, which is useful for them as well.
So I think another more common issue with terminology and the meaning of things is really the kind of the mismatch between accessibility and availability. So in some languages and some circumstances, people say that no, it's accessible on the website, which just means that we put it on the website. It's kind of published on the website, but that doesn't necessarily mean that people have access to it, that everyone has access to it. So, but it's always a balance between this, the terms that we use and kind of the expert terms, and what people on the street is calling different things. So I think it's important also to not be too much distinguishing too much on the different terms when you talk, especially when you talk to different stakeholders, as we have done here. So there may be different views on exactly where also the kind of the border between accessibility and usability is. That I think is a discussion point that could lead quite far if we start that discussion. So another interesting question here is, did you find best practice how to support people with cognitive threads for providing feedback? If not, what would you recommend?
That's a very good question, and as the others. So in a broad sense, yes. We think that whenever there's multiple ways of providing feedback, multiple channels, it is addressing the different cognitive abilities as well. Some users need an email to be able to write without strict limits or strict structure. Others prefer to have a guidance in a form. Others might be bothered that the form doesn't give all the possibilities, all the answer possibilities they could think of or they would need. So the first, providing the various feedback channels and solutions is addressing cognitive accessibility. What we found directly is in at least one member state, it is required to provide an easy read version of the accessibility statement, and I think about just a general description of the website. And in the same member state, it's also required to provide sign language version of certain parts of the website. So that's one best practice we found. It's also a legal requirement it's in Germany, but we think that it's a good practice, and it's on the side mentioned in the repository.
And I think also to have the contact channel early on, so that you don't need to dig through thousands of lines of text before you get to the actual contact possibilities, even if it's an email or form or something. That is, I think, good from a cognitive perspective, and also, of course, making the accessibility statement readable for human language, because it's often, I mean, if we move away from the specific of the feedback mechanism for a second and just look at the accessibility statement, which is kind of the hub where the feedback mechanism should live or stay, then I think there is a mismatch between what the legislator aimed for with the accessibility statement and what the public sector bodies actually do. So the accessibility statement have two distinctive target audiences. The monitoring body is the second one. The first target audience for the accessibility statement are the end users. But most of the accessibility statements that we see across Europe in all member states are written in a very, very technical way. And that was not the intention. So if you are a public sector body website owner here, please write your accessibility statement so that any average person would understand what it means, and don't use too many technical terms, and then link to the actual technical parts where you have all the success criteria and so on. That's fine. You can publish the whole report if you like. But the first place where the end user finds the accessibility statement, that needs to be understandable for just anyone. So more questions. How to handle the follow-up of a feedback provided? Any reactions from the website owners expected or required? How, when, and what?
Oh, yes, there's definitely, required. Well, it's also legally required. So the website owner should provide an answer to the feedback or react to the feedback within a reasonable period of time, if I remember well, the legal text. But in the repository, there are various best practices about it. There are different stages when feedback a response can be given to a feedback. We recommend to give like a confirmation of receipt right away, because it is good to know that your message arrived. And then there are. We recommend, or the repository recommends, to provide a timeline for fixing the issue, and that has two advantages. On the one hand, it is kind of the public sector body puts a timeline, obliges themselves to fix it in a period of time, and it's also good. It also creates trust between the user and the public sector body. And we think that we found that that's one of the reasons why users don't give feedback, because of this lack of trust of maybe nothing will happen. Then there are ideas came up that public sector bodies actually could keep like a live ledger that shows the status and the different feedbacks. We didn't get to recommend that or to put it in a best practice repository because, well, on the one hand, we didn't find any of those, and on the other hand, it can be burdensome. But if a public sector body, for example, would like to do that, we think it's a very good idea. It creates transparency, and it has a lot of advantages.
And the public sector body would get a gold star in heaven for doing that. So that's also good. So we have got some questions that are more generic about the Web Accessibility Directive. I'd be happy to respond to them if and when we have time. We have a general Q&A at the end, but I would like to make sure that we do have a break. That is also accessibility, and that we try to stick to the specific questions that are on the project. If we do not have time to respond to the more generic Web Accessibility Directive questions in the session, I'll be happy to send out our responses to them in an email afterwards, because we will send you a thank you email, everyone that registered for the event, with the recording and also the slides. So now it's time to have a 15 minutes break. Yes, could somebody who knows how to do that go to the next? So thank you. And so stretch your legs, move around, do something, have a cup of coffee, and come back very fresh in 15 minutes. And that is 5 minutes past 3 in Central European time and 5 minutes past 4 here in Cyprus. And I'm sure 5 minutes past anything anywhere. I won't go into that. So thank you very much for being with us, and see you in 15 minutes. Welcome back. I hope you had a good break, and we are now going to hear about the module curriculum, and then also the handbook, and how we are working on scaling up the material to make sure that we reach as many users as possible with the training material. So I would like to hand over first to Lucas. If you could please introduce yourself and then talk to us a little bit about the curriculum.
Yes, thank you, Susanna, for the introduction. My name is Lukas Baumann, and I'm from the TU Dortmund University. And I'm now going to present to you the model curriculum on how to teach people with disabilities to provide actionable feedback on web accessibility issues. And this project goal is based on the methodological toolkit and repository of best practices, which were presented to you earlier by Peter. And the main goal of this document follows the main goal of the project. So it is really about empowering users with disabilities to provide actionable feedback on accessibility problems. And you can expect from this document to have a structured description of course material, lessons, and assessment plans. And the target group of the model curriculum are vocational education and training providers, as well as organizations of persons with disabilities who are interested in doing training for their members. And the main thing I want to talk to you about today is, for us, when we decided to do this model curriculum, we wanted to have a curriculum which is flexible in usage. So the curriculum we designed allows for implementation in different learning contexts. So it can go further than just be used by vocational educational and training providers and organizations of people with disabilities. And we designed it in a way that trainers can focus on different key aspects. So you either can go on and do training that only consists out of basic information on feedback, but the curriculum also it gives you enough information that you can add additional details to your training and do, for example, a discussion on user feedback. Also, trainers can vary the depth of the content. So you either use the curriculum to do just a singular workshop, maybe not longer than 60 minutes, to just get the basic information to your user group. But it's also suitable to use it to do a more detailed training package, let's say something between 8 to 15 units. Each of the units is 60 minutes long, and the curriculum has enough information to cover that. And also the flexible usage allows for adaptation to the specific user needs of your user group and also the local conditions, because the implementation of the Web Accessibility Directive differs from country to country, and also the local conditions on, and the local conditions differ from country to country and also from region to region. So the curriculum respects that, and you can use the curriculum to design specific content or specific training for these user needs and for the local conditions. The curriculum consists out of, or is divided into 3 modules. Each of the module covers a different topic. The first module is on web accessibility. So it covers the basic knowledge for web accessibility, and also it talks about the implementation of the Web Accessibility Directive. In module 2, the curriculum is about understanding feedback. So it addresses the importance of user feedback and allows for discussion on user feedback and how important user feedback is in the context of the Web Accessibility Directive. And it also presents feedback options, so users can learn how the feedback mechanism will present itself to the user and how you can use the feedback options to actually give feedback. And the last thing, the last module is on actionable feedback. So it starts by giving information on, by giving basic information on actionable feedback. So what is actionable feedback? What does actionable mean? And then the curriculum gives guidance on how to actually give actionable feedback. And one last thing that is really important for us and for this topic is that the curriculum also covers the details on the follow-up process. So what will happen after you've sent your feedback. Each module contains expected learning outcomes, as well as different units with suggested content and assessment, and also suggested teaching methods and relevant resources that you can use for the training or to prepare for your training. And one last thing is that I want to address is why we're focusing on training the end user. I think, Susanna, you already mentioned that in the beginning of the event. But I want to stress that it's really important that when we talk about empowering people, it's important that people with disabilities understand their right to report accessibility issues, to make a decision if they really want to give feedback or don't want to give feedback. But first, you need to understand that you have the right to report to make this decision. And also it's really relevant to understand the relevance and importance of feedback. For example, public sector bodies might not even be aware that the website has accessibility problems. And so website owners can learn a lot from feedback. And I think, Peter, you mentioned earlier that feedback can actually be a gift in this context. And also this bottom-up process, which the feedback mechanism basically is, fosters participation. And on the long run, reporting barriers can help other users as well. So thank you for your attention. The curriculum is available on the project website, and I think Susanna will share it with you on in the chat. It's currently available on the project website in English, but we have also translated it to German and French, which will also be available in the coming days or weeks. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucas, very much. And it's also translated into Swedish. So we were just making all this, the big language that everyone is thinking about. So we are going to make sure that all the documents are accessible and then upload them as soon as possible on the project website. So that is still to come. So I wanted to ask a question that came in just before we broke for the break. And I hope Lucas will be prepared to respond to that, because it has to do with the research, but you have also been involved in that. So I think it's okay. So, and I think the question is relevant. So how well known was the possibility to provide feedback among the interviewees at the beginning? Do you feel that the improved feedback mechanism alone is sufficient to increase given feedback by the end users, or is additional awareness for this possibility necessary? So it's actually two questions, but.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's really good questions, or two really good questions. So the interviews did not really know about the possibility to provide feedback, and I think they were all really receptive to learn about it and to use it in the end. Researching this feedback mechanism, we all think that an improved feedback mechanism alone is not sufficient for dealing with this topic, because oh no, I'm having a blackout.
So no, you started, I think, with responding to it, that the awareness is also, of course, needed for this. Not only the feedback mechanism doesn't exist in a vacuum, so we need both sides. We need the feedback mechanisms to become better, but we also need the end users to use the feedback. Otherwise, it kind of, we need both sides here in this circle, and that is why we're also focusing on scaling up and making sure that it reaches as many as possible. So thank you for that. And now we are going to talk about the handbook of practical guidelines. So I want to give the floor to our host, Angie. Could you please introduce yourself and also the topic?
For sure. Hi, my name is Andrea and I come from Synthesis. We are hosting this event, and it's with great pleasure that we have all partners here to discuss about such an important issue. What I'm focusing here in my presentation is the project result titled Practical Guidelines. So what are the practical guidelines? The practical guidelines are focusing on how to empower people and train people with disabilities on providing quality feedback on accessibility problems. So the practical guidelines serve as a resource of information on initiating the creation of the training courses that we discussed, the courses based on model curriculum as Lucas presented it. And they also aim to offer practical and specific instructions on how the model curriculum can be adapted to various cultural backgrounds, hence the scaling up. And overall, with this project result, we want to offer the support on how to produce training courses that will raise awareness and increase the knowledge of people with disabilities regarding actionable feedback on accessibility barriers. Of course, another important aspect here is that we aim to give detailed information on how the project results. Sorry, technical issues here. Sorry. It's good break just to gather my thoughts. It's how can the project results be compiled combined for maximum efficiency and for facilitating the scaling up of the project's results. So, who was those practical guidelines designed for? They were designed for vocational education and training providers in EU member states who are interested in producing VET courses in this field, for national organizations for people with disabilities across the EU, and EU and all organizations that are interested in organizing training programs for their members, and also for the general public or anyone who is basically interested in utilizing and adapting the project results. And now, what shall we expect from these guidelines? What is the content of these guidelines? In the guidelines, you will find a guidance on how to apply the universal design for learning, which is the model we have used when creating the model curriculum. As it is widely known, the universal design for learning creates the space for flexible learning and inclusive classroom environments. Hence, our usage of this model of learning. First of all, you will find guidance on you will find a summary on the principles of the universal design of learning, which should inform the learning process, namely the multiple means of representation, multiple means of action and expression, and multiple means of engagement. And also, you will find information about how to set up a face-to-face training, what you need to pay attention to, the trainer's competencies and skills that are necessary to ensure maximum engagement and efficiency, as well as guidance on how to ensure accessibility in communication. Chapter 3 of the practical guidelines offers information about the target groups, and specifically you can find information about how to motivate people with disabilities to attend these trainings, how to adapt the training to the different target groups, and also additional resources on how to develop and conduct inclusive training. The final section of chapter 3 of the practical guidelines also gives guidance on how to raise awareness on accessibility beyond the scope of the training. Then moving to chapter 4, which is a chapter about how to utilize the model curriculum. There, the content focuses on offering practical guidance as to how to take maximum advantage of the model curriculum. And you also will find resources about how to link the model curriculum to the methodological toolkit and the repository of best practices that were developed in the scope of this project. More specific, chapter 4 includes details about the content of the model curriculum and the validation process that was followed, the aims it serves, details on how to localize and adapt it outside the partner countries, instructions on how to implement it with practical examples and support material, as well as practical guidelines on how to link it with the toolkit and the repository. Overall, we can say that chapter 4 was developed with the aim of creating a document that will help VET trainers, DPOs, and other interested parties in creating informed training courses which respond to the needs of people with disabilities in various contexts, and will work towards raising awareness about end users' right of digital accessibility. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andri. And we have a couple of questions here. I think we have time for questions as well. So First of all, we had questions about the languages of the model curriculum, which languages they are available in, and as Lucas said, with a little help, we have them in English online on the website right now. They are translated to German, French, and Swedish. Thank you, and they will be uploaded soon. And we also have already started in the scaling up process in 2 further countries, so they are currently being also, if not already finished, translated into Czech and Hungarian. And we will continue to work with disabled persons organizations and other organizations who are interested in using the training material in their countries. So if you happen to be interested in using this, these are all the material is freely available under CC license, and as long as you refer back to the project and the Erasmus funding, you are welcome to use it and translate it. And the whole idea with Erasmus projects and with our aim with this project is, of course, to spread this knowledge to as many as possible. Please use it, and just if you are interested in collaboration or doing something together with us, if there's anything we can do to help, just reach out, and we will be happy to collaborate. But right now, published English, very soon to be published French, German, and Swedish, and then at least Czech and Hungarian to come. So that's where we are with the languages. And the next question is about background material. Do we refer to background material freely available? And I'm not sure what background material means, but maybe Lucas, you can take that one.
Yeah, I think the question means the relevant resources or I mentioned in the presentation. And yes, everything in the curriculum is free to use. So you don't have a paywall or anything like that. All background material can be accessed and used freely.
Very good, thank you. And the next question is, can the training be done online, maybe also international?
Yeah, sure. Why not? I think that's a good idea to do the training online. We also have a section on that, on face-to-face training, online training, and the practical guidelines. And it is possible to do it in an international style. Sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I agree, but I also think that there is an idea with the translations, and the reason we are really trying to do this at national level is to make sure that as many users as possible can participate, because not everyone speaks English. So I think it's a good idea to do kind of an international EU-wide thing, but we would risk losing some or excluding some users. So I still think translations and collaboration at national level is important to reach all corners of Europe. So we have another question, which is interesting as well. So hoping that efforts towards actionable feedback will be successful. However, what would you expect if not more feedback will be created? Your expectation, will EU or the member states stop the effort and remove the feedback option? And I can tell you that I do not think so. It's written in the law, and it would surprise me very much if the European Commission withdraw that part of the legislation. And I also know that since we did the review of the implementation of the directive, the Commission and the member states are really focusing on this, because that was one of the findings of the review, as Susanne mentioned earlier, that the feedback part of the 3 pillars are not yet working as good as it could. So I really think that many of the member states are struggling with this and working on it. Hopefully our project can help a little bit, but there are also other efforts happening. And I do not expect to see a change in the directive. I rather think that we need to work together on all levels with all stakeholders to make sure that the feedback mechanism actually works in a good way. I'm not objective on this because I worked so hard with the directive in the transposition, but I really think that the 3 pillars are extremely cleverly made. So the top-down monitoring, the accessibility statement in the middle, which kind of forces the public sector body to actually understand if they are accessible or not, and then declare it, and then the bottom-up approach from the end users. If and when that works in a good way, I think it's a fantastic opportunity to have the stakeholders working together for a higher level of accessibility. So let's hope that we all together can make this happen. I think that was the questions we had. So we have some more generic question, but why don't we move to the scaling up first, and then we can take the generic questions afterwards. So now we have to do a little bit of a musical chairs here, which is good, because then we also need to move around, and that is always important. So, and for the scaling up part of this, I would like to leave the floor to Amandine. If you could please introduce yourself and tell us about this part.
Thank you. So I'm Amandine Guillaume, the project manager of the European Blind Union. Thank you. And I will introduce the scaling up opportunities across the EU for UPowerWAD project. So our project consists in resources that are flexible. This is my first point, and then I will develop the ideas to disseminate these resources and implement the trainings of the curriculum widely. And then so our documents are to empower persons with disabilities to give actionable feedback, consist into 4 documents: a toolkit, a repository of best practices, a curriculum model, and practical guidelines. Yes, our resources are flexible. They have been translated. They are available, of course, in English, and our curriculum has been translated into French, German, and Swedish. And they are also provide advice to take into account various specific needs. For example, we base our recommendation on the universal design for learning. This is a teaching methodology provided by this and that respect the needs and abilities of all learners and remove unnecessary obstacle in the learning process. It creates a flexible learning experience where information is offered in various ways, and it facilitates the creation of an inclusive environment in a classroom where learners feel that they are respected, encouraged, and valued. The core notion in the universal design for learning is that barriers to learning are in the environment's design, not in the learners themselves. And if these barriers are removed, the learning outcomes will be maximized for a broad range of learners. Regarding the content of our resources, they are applicable to give feedback to websites and to mobile apps. This can be used to prepare a singular workshop or to give detailed training courses. And furthermore, it is applicable to various levels of information and communication technologies and various level of usage. It is designed to be useful for even for end users who don't have a high level at ICT, and also for end users who don't have a frequent usage of this information and communication technologies. And now we have 2 partners who have already confirmed that they will translate and use the UPowerWAD training materials in their countries, Czech Republic and Hungary. And our consortium will disseminate the curriculum and the other documents to our via our associated partners, EDF, BAG, the European Disabled Forum, and also the Disabled Student Service in Germany, DOBUS, and so Lebenshilfe NRW, University of Nicosia, the French Federation of Blind and partially sighted people, and so on. And we also have ideas to further disseminate these resources and implement trainings. EBU will release the project resources on its website. So the European Blind Union will also share the materials with its partners and its national delegations in 42 countries, including 26 EU member states. And EBU, we also plan to develop a training plan with some partners or members, and we will use this curriculum to give a workshop on the occasion of the yearly training events, such as the ICC camp, an international camp on communication and computers for blind and partially sighted youth. And these actions could be referenced to serve for other umbrella organization. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much for this. So let's see if we have any questions around this in the Q&A. Let me just read this. So we have a little bit of a discussion on the fact that we said that no one has really provided, or that we didn't find examples of a feedback mechanism that allowed the user to sign. So I've got a couple of examples of organizations, mainly in Germany, where they have, I don't think it's the whole of Germany. I think it's just some Bundesländer, but I may misremember that, where sign language and easy to read is actually required. And there is also services that some of them agencies are connecting their feedback system to. So that's interesting, and thank you for that. We can update the repository and the toolkit with this information. So that's very, very helpful. And then, yeah, we have more or less responded to the questions, I think, that have to do with the project as such. So we could move on to the more general questions that we have got about the directive. So if you don't have any other comments or something you would like to share before we do that. To what extent can automated tools be relied upon for Web Accessibility Directive compliance, and where does manual intervention become necessary? So this question can divide the accessibility community in many different parts, different pieces and discussions. So depending on who you ask, the automatic tools can provide some kind of idea about at least non-compliance for, depending on who you ask, from 20 to maybe up to 40% of WCAG. But as we all know, the Web Accessibility Directive doesn't directly point to WCAG, but to the EN 301-549, and all the requirements that go beyond WCAG is not possible to test automatically. So it's hard to say exactly which part can be done automatically testing on, but the most important thing I think is to remember is that what the automatic tools do good is really searching for non-compliance. And that's also how the monitoring is set up in the Web Accessibility Directive. So the simplified monitoring is focusing on non-compliance, whereas the in-depth monitoring is focusing on compliance and full compliance. So the non-compliance part, the simplified, is picking up a couple of, or doing spot checks on the non-compliance, whereas the in-depth monitoring is checking all the requirements. So to make sure that that your website or app complies with the legislation, you will always need to do some manual testing It's interesting that not even the simplified methodologies are provided with automated tools in all member states. We have examples of member states who are doing both of these monitoring exercises manually with experts, and we also have at least one example of member states who are doing the simplified methodology with people with disabilities. So there are all sorts of different ways of doing this, and many different tools are used as well for the non-compliance part of the automatic testing. So I'm sorry for sounding like a politician when responding to that, but it's not a yes or no 52% kind of answer to that. Another question is very generic. Do you expect AI to make a difference or create other access problems? Well, that is another thing we could talk about for weeks. I would recommend some of the videos provided from the Enabling Summit in Washington, D.C. A month ago. There are things online if you look at Enabling Summit, and there has been a lot of discussions. Also, TechShare Pro just a week ago in London had also several AI components to their discussions, and I believe also that is online already. So there are, I think personally, I think there are a lot of opportunities with AI, but we need to be careful. AI will just take out the bad things from internet as it is now, and it's unfortunately a mirror of also many of the bad things in society. So when you ask for things for the AI to respond to things, you will get the bias and the problems that we have already in society. So we can't trust AI completely. We need some kind of manual quality assurance to that, just as when we use auto captions, they are fine up to a certain extent, at least in some languages, and then we need to refine it manually afterwards. So I think the same goes for all of the AI. And then there are quite a few researchers and others who are much more negative or skeptical to this than I am. There is a very interesting video with Jutta Treviatis from Canada, a fantastic researcher, who is very, very skeptical and very worried about the whole AI thing. And I can never, I could never argue against her because everything she says is very well founded in research. So that is also very interesting. And I think we can also provide a link to that. There is at least one recording free of charge, I know, with her talking about that. And then there's the other part where the industry says that the AI is going to change everything, and we will have everything automated, and the accessibility industry doesn't have to exist in a couple of years because everything will be solved. I stand somewhere in the middle there, but I don't think anyone know exactly what the future will bring. But it's interesting times we're living in, and a lot is really happening, and it goes quick. And Zoom just not more than a month ago or so released a handful of new languages, including small languages in the north of Europe. So we are now also doing very good auto captions, not only in Teams, but also in Zoom included in the tools. So many interesting and good things are happening for sure when it comes to AI and accessibility. And I'm sure there will be more to come if we as a society are careful enough to do this. And yes, I will try to remember to provide links to everything I'm talking about, but I can't do it simultaneously. So I will need to do that in the email, in the thank you email we send out afterwards. So another question is about, with the rapid evolution of web technologies such as AI, VR, AR, all the fancy abbreviations, what are the implications for Web Accessibility Directive compliance? And how should organizations prepare to make these technologies accessible? For the compliance issue, it doesn't mean anything. You just need to comply, whatever technology you use. The problem comes when you want to understand how to make it accessible when the standards hasn't followed the technical evolution. So we are now currently, if I change my hat to the standards body, where I'm chairing the ETSIS and Senelec e-accessibility joint technical body, we are tasked by the Commission, by the mandate 587, to update 3 existing standards and create 3 new standards that will provide the minimum requirements or presumed conformance to the Accessibility Act. So in 2025, there will be new, fresh standards, but unfortunately, I am I don't want to sound negative, but I do not think that we will have much on the new emerging and immersive technologies in those standards, because standards move slow and technology right now moves very, very, very quickly. So I don't foresee that we have solved all of that to 2025, but for sure, the standards and requirements need to make sure that we take all of this into account in the new versions and new generations. But for compliance issues, by all means, try new technology and use AI and XR and whatever. But if you try something new, you need to test with users, because there is no way that your supplier will know how these new gadgets work before you have tested them with users. That would be my recommendation, at least. Do you have any other thoughts, Lucas?
No, I think you summed it up perfectly.
So, yes. So we still have questions. Do you want me to finalize? Is that what you're saying? No? Yes, when we finalize, we will, yes. So, okay, so we will just continue with the questions that we have got because we still have time. So that is good. This is not really a question. This is more of a comment. Keyboard shortcuts make navigating Microsoft Teams faster and more efficient. By becoming acquainted with these combinations, you can significantly reduce the time spent on repetitive tasks, allowing you to be more productive. So that was more like a comment from somebody. So thank you for that. And the last question is, do you see any difficulties in relying on voluntary feedback from end users? Is an approach comparable to user testing platforms discussed to compensate users for their accessibility feedback? Good question. Lucas, what do you think? Compensation for feedback, would that make people provide more feedback?
Let me think about this one.
Okay. What do you think, Amandine, from the user perspective? Would compensation for feedback be something the EBU would be positive to, do you think?
I don't know exactly if it would create more feedback, but from the EBU perspective, we really want to emphasize that when we give a feedback, we would like to have an answer. Otherwise, there is no motivation to give feedback because it's we don't know if there will be if it will be taken into account. We don't even know if it will be read by somebody who can do something about this issue. So it is important to have an answer for the feedback. But maybe also compensation could do something. We did not discuss the question. Not yet.
Acknowledgement, that's the key.
And Lucas, did you think now so that you are prepared to to respond?
So I think it's a good idea, but when we talk about empowering, there is a risk that it all lies on the user in the end. So first of all, the public sector body and their websites need to be accessible, and an approach where you rely on user testing can lead to a world where public sector bodies just rely on the user testing. And I think user testing is really good and really really helpful, but it would be just way above the feedback mechanism, how it is presented today.
Yes, I agree with you. That would be kind of the ultimate fantastic world, but who would pay for that? That would be impossible, I think, not feasible. But the way I read the question, maybe I'm reading between the lines, but I think the idea is that when we talk about user testing, usually we always state that the user should be given compensation for providing, because the users are the experts and they should be paid as users. That's what I read in this. Maybe it's not the idea of the question, but I'm thinking I don't think we ever discussed this in the project. So so thank you for this idea. I think it's interesting. I'm just thinking, could it have a kind of a negative incentive so that people start just providing gibberish to kind of win the lottery, to get more money? I think it could be a little bit tricky maybe, or difficult, but for sure, I mean, the basic idea, if I as a user provide feedback and that is actually helping the public sector body to just do their job, yeah, of course, by all means, send me a gift card. I wouldn't mind, but I think it's difficult to kind of build that into the legal process. That I think is kind of, from a policy perspective, a little bit difficult. But maybe we should just encourage public sector bodies to at least have a little bit of their budget to do something good for the end users. I like the idea from the end user perspective. Yes, so we have another question here. Did you discuss how to motivate accessibility community to give also feedback? So I guess that's kind of accessibility with the A11Y abbreviation. I guess that is accessibility experts or accessibility, the kind of the broader perspective. And we could, of course, have experts providing feedback, but that would kind of lose the point a little bit, I think. There, I think personally, I think the experts should work for the agencies or indeed get paid to provide services, but really this should be focusing on the users. And that said, there are many accessibility experts that are end users as well. So I mean, that could be wearing both hats. But anyone has an idea of kind of the wider community, not only the end users, but also anyone else, an advocate, maybe like EBU providing feedback or something like that? We didn't discuss it, but it's an interesting question, I think.
At EBU, I think we wouldn't have time to give feedback on everything. But it would be an idea to develop a working group whose mission would be to track all the public sector website and report all inaccessibility issues regarding blind and partially sighted people.
Okay, thank you. And now we got another idea, and that is to create some kind of hackathon to solve all the questions about feedback and yeah. So that's also a good idea, I think. So if there are no more questions, I think we can give you 10 minutes of your afternoon back and just close this event a little early, and making sure that you know that you can reach out to the project by contacting Andri on andri.k@synthesis-center.com. That is andri.k@synthesis-center.com. And I think I need to write that in the chat. It was difficult to spell for me, at least. And then we have also the URL to the project website, which is funka.com/en/upower. So maybe somebody could support me in providing the email address in the chat so that we make sure that people have it. Does anyone have? Yeah. And we got another question while doing this. I think co-creation together with end users is the key, but still accessibility of the service cannot be the user's responsibility, ever as they may not be the accessibility experts. So this is something we often get, and two things. First of all, we do not put the responsibility of the accessibility on the end users. Lucas has said this several times, and Susanna as well, I think, so that the responsibility lays firmly at the public sector body website owner. That is no question about that. That is the legal requirement, and it's also something that we think is extremely important in the project. However, we think that with a little encouragement, a little training, motivation, maybe compensation even, if the users can provide feedback, if they want to, it's just voluntary. If they feel they have the time to contribute, that would help even more and make sure that the three pillars of the legislation, monitoring and assessment, accessibility statement, is really working as it's supposed to do. And the question about whether the users are accessibility experts or not, I would always say that the users are the experts. They may not be technical certified experts who live from being accessibility experts and kind of sending invoices around that, but they are absolutely the experts on inaccessibility, because nobody knows as much about how important accessibility is and where the barriers are as the people who encounter the accessibility barriers. So I would always call them experts. And then I know many in the disabled organizations community, they say, but don't tell people that we are experts, because then we get technical questions. But that's not the idea. If you have technical questions, by all means, go to the technical specialists and the suppliers. There are plenty of really good accessibility experts out there. But the usage of your website or service, I mean, if it's not accessible, the users know that it's not accessible. You should always listen to the users, according to me. Then if the wording expert or not, I don't know. But I mean, to me, a user is an expert on being that user. That is just, that's how I see this. But absolutely, co-creation would be the best way. I would hope that just like Lucas said, if every public sector body website had all the time and resources and money in the world and working together with users and doing regular user testing and so on, that would of course lead to much better services for all of us. But unfortunately, I don't think that is happening. So thank you very much, everyone, for attending this event, and we'll keep you updated on the next parts of this. And again, if you are interested in scaling up, translating, doing something specifically in your country or your community, don't hesitate to reach out. We're more than happy to support you. And we will publish the last parts of this project in the upcoming months. So the formal end of this project is on the 31st of January next year. So we still have a little bit of time to go. Thank you to my fantastic panelists and the former speakers, and especially to Susanne and Lucas and also Christian, who hasn't been online today, who are the leaders of the consortium. So the TU Dortmund are the coordinators, and they are leading this with brilliant intelligence and a soft hand, so that all of us can just follow suit and take all the credit. So thank you, everyone, and have a good rest of your day.